and gentlemen, welcome to Azeroth Daily for the 23rd of May 2011. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of WoW news and comment. If you hear a lot of background noise, it's because I think we're gusting around 80-mile-an-hour winds in this area at the moment, so sadly, since I'm not a shaman, I don't have any control of the elements, so you're just going to have to deal with it. In the headlines today, the Avengers of Hyjal reputation rewards have been data mined by MMO Champion. This faction is related to the Firelands raid and gives loot of the kind of standard that you would expect from that particular raid. Now, the Blue Poster Lilira has confirmed that there will be no way to grind your way to Exalted simply by farming trash, but otherwise it will work quite a lot like the Ashen Verdict. The item level of most of this gear is 378 with some 391 stuff as well, specifically 391 ring, which I have to assume is upgradable there. It's very, very nice indeed. You can check out the full list in the description below this video. The latest roundup of EU community news has been released, including foreign language news from battlecraft.it, which has finished telling the story of the Forsaken in their Share Your Lore section. Also, the Polish site WoWcenter.pl has covered the launch of the Arena Pass, and Hungarian site WoW-Hungary has another helpful article featuring another useful add-on that you may or may not know about. All that, a roundup of this week's comics, as well as noteworthy forum threads, and a couple of videos and fan art pieces to cap it all off in the description below this video. The next new player tips article has come out for you guys to participate in if you so desire, and this is on the subject of the best dressed quests, which has been written deliberately to make me have to retake this section numerous times. And in this case, it allows you to participate in telling newer players exactly where to go for the best questing experience. Of course, if you want to do that, you could just watch Azeroth Daily, which has the daily grind, which also does exactly the same thing, but it may also be useful for newer players as well. Now, this is not technically WoW related, but I want to put this out anyway, because I think it's relevant to what we've been saying in the last couple of weeks, and it's that Treon Worlds, the guys behind Rift, have announced that their character transfer system will be free, and will also be usable within the game, and will transfer a full guild, including the guild rank and experience and all that good stuff. So that's impressive, honestly, and I'm very glad to see them doing that. I've got to say, everything that Treon Worlds does up to this point has made me more tempted to play the game. The problem is I don't want to play another WoW-style game. But it's obviously a very good development attitude, and I think it's certainly something that Blizzard could take note of. There's a trial link, if you so desire, as well as the Ascend a Friend program for Rift, if you want to try something a little bit different, in the description below this video. And with that, it's time for your Daily Blues. Two Toes has an interesting question on the subject of legendaries and why exactly the old legendaries don't scale. He points out that right now they're merely trophy items to be kept in the bank, and it would be nice if you were able to keep using them. Bashiok responds by saying that weapons are pretty much the coolest item to upgrade. Head and shoulder slots are very visible, but for the most part it's most satisfying to get an awesome new weapon. Now, he argues that you'd be forced to pass on an awesome new weapon if you happen to have a scaling legendary. Well, the whole point of having a legendary is because it's a massive status symbol with unique abilities, so I don't see the problem. You really think I'd pass for some green staff if I happen to have Taragoza's Wrath, even if the green staff in the next expansion happened to be better? Hell no. It's like, it's the same reason they keep my Turning Tide around, because it's one of the best looking, if not the best looking caster sword in the entire game. Yes, I do not really agree with that particular attitude, and as other people pointed out, well, this is the concept of heirlooms, isn't it? And yet you put these in the game, so why is that a problem? Yes, and Bashiok doesn't seem to have a good answer to that one, I have to say. Yeah, I think the legendaries should certainly scale. I do get the argument from Bashiok that, oh, people would just go back and farm the legendaries when it was really easy to get them, and all sorts of stuff like that, but there's nothing stopping, one, Blizzard from taking the means of getting them out of the game, which they did with the old Atiesh, if you recall correctly. And also, they could very easily just stop them from scaling past a certain point. As simple as that. I'd also like to point out that at the end of the day, if getting a legendary is incredibly practical to the point where you can easily farm it, then there's something horribly wrong with the acquisition method of legendaries in general. This one is by White Zombie that says, I was told by a GM to post on the forums about my problems with the loot system, and this is named to the developers, and it's basically on the subject of other people are rolling on my gear. It's also a bit of a combo complaint on the subject of PvP-geared people coming into dungeons, which causes infinite wipes, and then they just need on items that you wanted to get and all that good stuff. You know how it goes. But whatever the case, Bashiok responds by saying there are restrictions that keep classes from rolling on gear they can't use at all, but that's more or less the extent of how much we want to step in and control loot rolls, which I might add I agree with Blizzard perfectly on. I don't think Blizzard should be legislating on personal player choice, and anything they tend to do in order to remove choice from the player, I dislike. The same thing as having item level restrictions on queuing in the dungeon finder with a full guild group. That's something I've got a problem with. It's like, it's the decision of my group as to whether or not this should be happening. I've also got a problem with them restricting the number of times you can kick people and things like that. It's like, I'm sorry, it's majority rule. 4 greater than 1. If 4 people vote to kick a guy out, that's it. That should be all Blizzard needs to know. But I don't really like the hypocrisy there from Blizzard, because they do actually meddle with player decisions more than I would like, and yet every now and again they're willing to say, well, we don't want to meddle and all that kind of thing, we don't want to control people, but they do in various aspects of the game, so it would just be nice to see a proper, consistent attitude from Blizzard in this regard. And with that, it's time for your daily grind. I sent my cameraman back to TBC to find some more interesting quests for you, and then discovered he was riding a sparkle pony. I will dock his pay, and he will not be fed for the rest of the week. Whatever the case, this one is a series of quests involving a Fellsworn gas mask, which is kind of one of the themes of TBC, really. They started to make quests whereby you used an item to interact with something else and deceive the Burning Legion. And if the Burning Crusade was anything to go by, then the Burning Legion are by far the stupidest antagonists we've ever actually had, since they're constantly fooled by this kind of nonsense. Now, wearing the gas mask will allow you to use the Legion communicator and convince the Fellsworn that their camp is in open revolt, which is absolutely absurd, but there you go, it seems to work. They don't appear to be all that bright. And with that, it's time for your weekly feature. This is Machinimondays. This one comes to us from the WoW Outcasts Network, which is the same guys that brought you the Ragnaros commercial a little while ago that I'm fairly sure I actually featured. And this is a parody of that old classic, yes, the Walrus and the Carpenter. And this is called the Tuskar and the Engineer. And I have the feeling, sadly, that some of this parody is going to go over the head of some people, and that, quite frankly, makes me depressed. But whatever the case, this is a thoroughly enjoyable parody. I think the only problem I've got, maybe, is with the lead voice actor. He's trying to be gruff, and he sounds a little bit too gruff, in my honest opinion. It's actually a little bit hard on the ears. Regardless, it's a nice piece of work, very, very well voice acted in general, with the exception of the narrator. From time to time, you know, let's be fair here, he's not horrible 100% of the time, it's just every now and again he's got this harsh edge to his voice that I don't particularly like. Aside from that, great visuals, great story, good rhyming scheme, and a fantastic parody of the classic. So, without further ado, I will give it a happy 4 trolls out of 5. You can check out the full video in the link in the description below this video. And with that, it's time for the mailbox. This one comes in from Terry. It says, "What's up? On occasion I go through the forum and I take a look at the popular topics. While I no longer play WoW, I still like to see what's going on within the game. The other day I was jumping onto a website and saw this post, I miss Wrath the Lich King difficulty. At first I thought someone was trolling, but upon further review, I saw they were serious and that others actually agreed. While they hopefully are a minority, what makes these people believe the kata is hard? Sure, it may be more difficult than Wrath, but that doesn't mean that it's hard by any stretch of the imagination. They then had the audacity to blame the drop in subs on how hard the content is. However, the main thing that annoyed me about this post was this. Most of all, I enjoyed being able to play at my own pace, because they actually don't want to play at their own pace, they want the game's pace to be their pace. Anyways, I wanted to know what your view on these people are and why they believe the game should be made for them, the individual. Well, it's mostly because there's a lot of very vocal, entitled idiots on the internet, particularly within the gamer community, and I use the word community very loosely. It's problematic, and I think actually it's because people are not taught in school the difference between objectivity and subjectivity. They will hold an opinion for something, however misguided, and they will view that opinion as the right one, and they will not understand how people cannot hold that opinion. And it makes them angry, and they tend to get very ragey and flamey. It's why you get so many arguments and flame wars within gaming communities and forums. In this case, the guy is, one, assuming that correlation equals causation, which is, of course, incorrect. Yes, 600,000 subscribers left. We don't know why. To identify it as the content being too hard is fallacious in the extreme. Admittedly, it's the same as any other argument unless you have any proof. And we can make an argument all we please about, well, it's because the content is too samey, or because there's not enough of it, or whatever. Some people might say it's because the content is actually too easy and it hasn't advanced. But there's no way to prove any of that. The stupidest thing is, if you actually have a look at this guy's original post, and I did read it, and it's fairly horrendous, honestly. The guy claims that his guild wiped for like 2 months on the trash for Magmore. There are 3 packs for Magmore that can be cleared in about 5 minutes, and there's nothing hard about them. So I really don't know. This guy just seems to be on the bottom rung of skill, and as a result, he's trying to overextend to content he's clearly not capable of doing. Now, saying, oh, we want to go back to the way Wrath was, is ridiculous. And he also made arguments by saying that, oh, the game appeals to casual players so much now, and like, no, it doesn't. Casual players do not mean bad players. God, I casually raid once a week. I raid about 3 hours a week. That's it. I probably raid less than this guy, and I'm still infinitely better, and I'm not even that good, because I ceased to care about being awesome at the game. Hell, you know, I used to be very practiced back in vanilla and TBC when I was raiding hardcore. Now I can't be bothered. I really, really can't, but I don't blame my failures on the game and say, oh, the game needs to be nerfed down to my level. No, I need to raise myself to the level of the game, and if I can't beat the content, that's my own fault. That's okay. I don't have to see everything to have a worthwhile subscription or indeed have a good time within the game. It's sadly people like this that are driving this horrible development attitude of, we should let everybody see the content. And no, you shouldn't. If they want to see the content, they can watch it on YouTube. If they want to do the content, well, they've got to be good enough. It's as simple as that. Hell, give them a goddamn guided tour of the instance. I don't care, as long as they don't get any epics out of it. This one comes in from Timothy. It says, in the mailbox of 2105, someone raised the point about old raiding. Now, I've never set foot in a raid, and I won't because I'm still leveling. Conversion of TBC raids into 10-mans would be an efficient way of providing another choice for old content. But what about adding more difficulties for dungeons in general? Normals are often too easy, and most heroics, with a slow rise in overall power, provide little challenge as well. Can we not have another 1 or 2 modes to add difficulty? Adding an easy mode for casuals, upping the difficulty for normals and heroics, and perhaps adding a legendary mode for the hardcore groups would work well if Blizzard actually put some effort into old content without turning it into new content. Ahem, Zolaman and Zul'Gurub. Do you think there should be more difficulty levels? Yes, I absolutely do, and I believe it was either Tom Chilton or Jeff Kaplan last year at a Gamescom interview specifically stated that they actually recognized that problem and they wanted to do something about it. The thing is that they didn't. They actually did nothing about it and reversed it, in fact, because back in Ulduar there were multiple difficulty levels. You had what was called non-binary hard modes, which were the ability to choose how you wanted to approach an encounter. There weren't all that many encounters that did it, but there were a few. Freya is one example, Yogg-Saron is another, and the Flame Leviathan was another, and I believe those were the 3 major non-binary hard modes in Ulduar, and they were awesome because you were able to do the encounter at your own pace, and that's the whole at your own pace thing. Providing multiple difficulty levels actually helps people learn, and right now you do have this easy and hard thing going on. Now, I would like to see the ability to jump into something that was more challenging from the get-go. I think the idea of having to do normal modes for ages in order to get the gear to do heroics is actually counterproductive, and if you have a look at the number of people that have downed, say, Cho'Gall, then the number of people that have downed Harthas Wormbreaker and then Valiona and Thoralion, and I think that what that indicates is that people get very, very bored very easily with doing the same content multiple times, and they would be less bored if the first time through it wasn't a complete slaughterfest. Now, that's not to say that the raids right now are easy. They're not. They're much better than the Wrath ones were from the start. Much, much better, and I've got to applaud them for that. It's just, I am a little bit frightened that they will go that way. We'll have to see. And there's bits of Firelands that are really good, and then there are bits of Firelands that really aren't, and I think Firelands perhaps might provide the strongest argument for this, simply because it's going to be so easy to clear that dungeon quickly. There's only 7 bosses, that's all that's available in that tier. But whatever the case, giving people choice as to how they want to approach the content is never a bad thing. DDO does this, actually. They have a minimum of 4 difficulty levels for the vast majority of their dungeons, and it really does help, because it also allows you to actually solo the dungeon on the solo difficulty level if you don't want to play with other people, but you don't get as good loot, and you don't get as great rewards, so it's a good system. I like it a lot, and I think it's certainly something they could definitely do with implementing, as long as they don't spend too long on it. I think the risk is that either Blizzard will use it as an excuse not to put out as much content, or it genuinely takes that much time. I really don't think that it does. if I'm totally honest with you. I don't know a lot about the development process, but it does seem to me that using heroic modes as an excuse to put out less dungeon content is just that. It's an excuse, and really they could be developing a lot of different difficulty levels without spending a huge amount of time on it. But I don't know. It's difficult to say. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching Azeroth Daily, and I do have a Postcards from Azeroth theme for you for this week. Now, this week's going to require a little bit of camera trickery. No model viewer for this, folks. I need you to do it in-game. I need you to find and post a picture of you riding your dream mount, and that can actually be something that isn't a mount. In fact, I would like it to be just that. So you have to sort of get the camera angle right to make it look like you're riding something that clearly is not actually a mount, but I want you to take a photo of that and post it over on facebook.com/cynicalbrit, and of course the best one will win a 60-day WoW time card. Thank you very much, guys. I will see you next time.